Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Denver, Colorado. I'm so glad you could join me today. This is my buddy Puccini, who keeps me company in the craft room and keeps me company just in general. And he's usually up to no good. I've got some fun pictures that'll go up on my blog here in the next couple of days. He was playing with a see-through bag and was convinced we couldn't see him. And what I have for you today is the first Christmas card of the season. I had a challenge with a swap with a group of demonstrators that I meet in Denver with, and their theme was Christmas in July. And I usually start my Christmas designs in August, but I thought, absolutely, this is going to be fun and we'll kind of get this done. And so let's just get started. It's kind of a fun one. Here is my card, and I have an earlier version of it. Between the first one that I did, which was this one, and this one, I changed a little bit, and I'm going to change a little bit more. This is the set I'm using. I'm using Christmas lights, and then I'm also using Brightest Glow Bundle, Lights Aglow Suite, which is both stamp sets and die sets, and then this beautiful paper. And this is Lights Aglow 6x6 Specialty Designer Series paper, and it's just gorgeous. I've had a lot of fun playing with this, and let me show you the paper. The paper is this, isn't that gorgeous? And then this with the Christmas trees, and I stamped my Christmas tree and then cut it out with the dies, but there's all different colors. This is Evening Evergreen and Soft Succulent, black, there's Cherry Cobbler, gold, obviously. There's all kinds of very interesting designs and interesting things you can do with this. And I ended up using this paper and this paper. Now, you won't recognize those by looking at my card, because what I did on these was I took my tree stamp from that stamp set and I covered it in Versamark, and I just stamped all over this piece and then cut this piece in half. So this piece is one that I used, and I'll tell you, after making a couple of these, it just looked so busy that I decided less is probably more. So I've decided to use this paper just the way it is. And this piece is 3 inches by 4.5, so you can get 2 cards out of a piece of paper. And what I'd suggest is that you cut your paper the 4.5 from the bottom up, and then cut off this part that has a little less of the gold. And I wasn't clever enough to do that, so I'm going to do that right now by bringing out my trimmer and showing you exactly what I mean. So if we cut this to, that's 4.5 inches right there, and then I cut this down to 3 inches and 3 inches, then I can get 2 cards out of this piece of paper, and it has plenty of gold on both panels. So we'll just pick one of these and use that to make our card today. And you'll have to tell me what you think, whether you like the busier design with all of this extra embossing on it. But I decided that this is actually easier, and I think it'll look just as well. The only other thing I changed between this card and this card is I did my joy in, instead of ink, I did it in embossing powder, and I do like this better. And the insides are virtually the same. This stamp didn't stamp very dark in either case. This one was a little bit better, but I think I'm going to set this up in my Stamperata so that we can stamp it a couple of times and get it just exactly right. But I used a strip of this paper right along the edge here to get this 3/4 inch strip here to bring a little bit of the Christmas tree to the inside, and then a few of these little stars. So let me go back and tell you exactly what I used to make the card. So the first thing I did was I used a card base. This is 8.5 by 5.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4, so just a regular A2 base. And what I did, and I've already done mine, is I ran the front of the card through an embossing folder. And the embossing folder is one we've had for a while, but I just love it. It is Printed Texture 3D embossing folder. And so what I did, and I'll tell you exactly how I did this, is I put this in the embossing folder so that the pattern, see there's a little tiny ridge on the edge of this folder that doesn't have any pattern on it. So when you do this, you have to make sure that you get the fold all the way over to where the pattern is. Then you close it, and then you run this through your machine this way. It's generally suggested that you run it through with this edge first, but in this case, in order to make this work, I needed to run it through this way. And as long as you're not doing it routinely, it won't hurt your folder. So here is my card base, and I've already got that embossed image on the front of my card. Then we have this piece of paper that I just cut. And actually both of these would work. I think I'll use this one because my Christmas tree is over here, and that's a little bit more blank here. And I'm going to see if I like it being a little less busy on the front panel. So I have this piece, which is 3 inches by 4 inches. Then I have a piece to mat that, 3 1/4 by 4 3/4. That's going to mat that and go on the front of our card. And then I have a piece of scrap so that I can stamp my image on here, put with Versamark and use the gold powder, and then use a die to cut that out. And to save a little bit of time, I've already done mine. So there's my piece of evening evergreen with my tree on it, and then I've just cut it out using my embossing machine. So we have our Christmas tree all done and ready to go here. Let me show you the, let's see, I showed you this in the catalog, but this is the one stamp set, and this other stamp set is mostly just greetings, which is a very nice thing to have for the holiday, because it's got all kinds of great greetings in it. Season's greetings, Merry Christmas, joy, let your heart be light, 'tis the season, you and yours this Christmas, wishing you a season of hope and light. All is merry and bright, hoping your Christmas shines bright with love of family and friends. Happy holidays, may the peace of the season light your world, and may your new year be the brightest. There's just some really nice sayings in this one. So that's what I'm using. And I did not use the dies that have the labels with that one. I just did my joy stamp from this set. And then I used this one, hoping, let's see, what did I put on the inside? Yeah, hoping your Christmas shines bright with the love of family and friends. And so that's what I used. And then I used the tree stamp from here, and I used this little star stamp. All right, so then for the inside, we need a piece of evening evergreen that is 4 by 5 1/4, and a piece of soft succulent that is 3 3/4 by 5 to layer on top. And then I have a piece of that Christmas tree paper that is 5 inches by 3/4 of an inch. And then I have my 2 pieces of scrap to make my raised sentiment on the front. The other thing that I used was champagne rhinestones, and I used some of our shimmer ribbon. I used the gold shimmer ribbon and the soft succulent ribbon for the card. So the very first thing we can do is for the inside, let's do our stamping, I think, first. So I'm going to grab my Stamparatus. I have put my piece of Soft Succulent that is 3 3/4 by 5, and I've set the top edge at the 2-inch mark and the bottom edge at the bottom line before the ruler, and then right along the edge, and put my magnets in place. And my stamp is going to be right here in the corner, as it is on both of the copies that I did, but I'm going to get the chance to stamp it a couple times to get a much crisper image. So I'm going to use my Evening Evergreen, and I'm going to ink up my stamp. You know, it's almost always best to put something underneath this so you're stamping at a good angle for the whole thing. And there I've got my mark there. My paper's in the right place. So I'm going to stamp my image. And see, it doesn't stamp very dark. So I'm going to re-ink that. And I'm going to stamp it again. And I like that much better, and I'm going to do it one more time because the font on this is very thin, so it doesn't get a lot of color when you stamp it. So if you're not doing this in the Stamparatus, I think you're going to be disappointed in the stamping that you get. There, now it says that's really nice and clear. Hoping your Christmas shines bright with the love of family and friends. And see, what would it be like doing that without the Stamparatus or some stamp positioning tool, because the message is just very, very faint otherwise, because the font is narrow. So that's a good thing to do, although I know some people that stamp everything with their Stamparatus, and I have good luck stamping freehand. But this one, on the 2 samples that I did ahead of time, both of them came out more faint than I thought I was happy with. So I decided to do this one setting up on the Stamparatus. So this piece is now stamped, and then the next thing we have to stamp is our little joy message, and I've got that set up here, and I'm going to do that in Versamark and gold embossing powder. So I'm going to use my embossing buddy on my piece of Soft Succulent here, and I'm going to ink up my joy stamp, and I'm going to stamp that, and I'm lining up the top of the joy so that the Y is just ever so slightly up. And there I've got my joy so that it kind of angles up, and I've got my gold embossing powder, and I'm going to get some embossing powder on that word, and there we go. That looks good, and it doesn't look like it needs to be cleaned off. So I'm going to run my heat tool on that, and as is my practice, I will quiet the video and be right back. My joy, and I'll show you how I cut that to get that angle. I just angled from, in about 1/4 of an inch to the end and got that angle. And because that angle came from there, all I have to do to reverse it and get it on this side is to turn it over and get it set lined up with the bottom, and it'll give me that same angle coming back the other way. So I just need to slide this over to about right there, and then I will just hold that in place and cut along that edge. And magically you end up with exactly the same angle on both sides. So there's a little way for you to do that pretty easily. Now this piece can go on my matting piece right here. Next I need my seal, And I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to the back of my message and get that set so that it's straight at the top and the bottom. So there is my sentiment, and now I can set that on my card like this. Okay, now the next bit of stamping I'm going to do is using my little stars, again in Versamark, and I put some stars on the inside of the card next to where my strip of paper went. So I'm going to grab my strip of paper as though we're going to go on here so that I know right where to stamp my stars. So I'm going to do it right in here, so I want to make sure I've got embossing powder there, and then right down here on the bottom, and I'm just going to leave that in place while I do my stamping so that I get those stars right where I want them. Okay, so in here once, and then down here a couple of times, and then I'll add some embossing powder to that, and I'll get that run through the machine. I can see that I've gotten a little bit of an edge on a couple of places here. So what I think I'm going to do is use my brush and take off the powder that's along that edge on both of those. I'm going to put my heat tool on this and I'll be right back. My embossing medium, my Versamark, left a shadow in both of those places, and I'm going to grab my eraser, a sand eraser, and see if I can fix those. Well, it looks like those pretty much aren't going to come off. So I think what I'm going to do is see if I can fix this by adding a tiny bit more of the stamping over the top of those marks. Okay, well that didn't work. So fixing it didn't work. So I ended up taking the stamp off of the block and trimming away the edge that I kept catching, and then I turned the card over, and so I embossed my stars, and then I put my sentiment in. So I just did it off camera. There's the original one, and it just left a shadow and it looked very bad. So now this piece is ready to go on the front of my card, and I just re-stamped everything and put the stars where I wanted them. Now we can go back to where we left off making the card. This is the inside piece, and this, I think we've got all of our stamping done, and I'm going to add some snail to the back side of this piece, and we'll get that put on the card. And we're going to mat this first on the evening evergreen and get that set in place, and then we're going to add some more adhesive, put my card in place, and here is the inside of my card. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in place there, and the only thing we need to do, let me make sure that this strip actually fits on here. It does. We don't have to trim it. So I'm just going to add some adhesive to that and put that in place right here along the edge. And so there is the inside of our card all done. So now putting together the front of the card. This piece is just going to go on this mat, and what I decided to do with this card is that I raised the sentiment and the tree and laid this panel flat on the card because there's already a lot of dimension with that embossing folder. So I'm going to set this piece in place and get that matted, and then I'm just going to go ahead and add some adhesive to this. I think I'm going to put a bead across the bottom here. It doesn't hurt when there's embossing to have a little bit more adhesive on there, because there's so many ridges on this that you want to make sure you've got enough adhesive to really make it stick. So there we go. So that's on there. Now we have our Christmas tree. Oh shoot, I forgot to put the ribbon on there. I'm going to see if I can get that off in a big hurry. I can't. I'm going to take my silicone mat and we're going to put our ribbon on. So I ended up with pieces of ribbon on this that are about 5.5 inches. And so that seems to be enough to go around the card. Now I'm going to use my dot runner here on my ribbon and put a bead of adhesive on the back of the ribbon so that it won't move once I put it in place. So I'm going to set that down right across there. That looks pretty straight. I think that will work. And I'm going to anchor that around the back. And then I'm going to cut a similar piece of this gold shimmer ribbon. About 5.5 inches is what this ends up being. And I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to the back of this ribbon as well. We're going to take that ribbon and put it right down the center of this Soft Succulent ribbon, and anchor that also on the back of my card. And I'm going to add just a little bit more adhesive to the backs of these ribbons, and we're going to put this back on the card. Get a couple of these things out of the way here. And so this piece is going to go right on here, center top to bottom, leaving just a small margin on this end, on the left side. Okay, now then, this Christmas tree is going to go up on dimensionals. Tree is going to go right along this edge, and this is where the blank place was, so that's going to work out. And I'm going to put it just off the panel, just so you can barely see a little bit of the ribbon on this side, and put that in place. And there we go. Very nice. Now I'm going to take our sentiment and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a couple of dimensionals and put that in place right up here on our card. And actually, I think I did that with the other one, and I'm going to do that with this one. I'm going to tilt it just a little bit. I think I like the way that looks. Okay, so now the only thing we need here is some embellishments and a little bow. And I made my bow very small. And I do have some bow making videos up on my channel. If you have struggled with a bow, I give you some pretty easy ways and 2 or 3 different kinds of bows that you can make. You can make a faux bow, which is just a knot bow. Show you how to make double bows. There's all kinds of things in that video. All right, so now I've got my bow made. To anchor that in place is I used some glue dots, and for this kind of thing I like using the glue dots that are left over from the paper pumpkins. And so I take my glue dots and put them right down here where I want them on my card, and then I lift the paper because I like putting these couple of them on top of each other, or overlapping at least a little. And so I put a couple of those down and pick up the release paper, and then I can put my bow into place right down there. The embellishments that I used on this was the champagne rhinestones. I think I'd like that ribbon tail to be down a little bit further. So I think I'm going to add another glue dot to encourage that to come down a little bit. So I'm going to put one right down here and remove the release paper and encourage that tail to come down. And there we go. On this, what I did was I used the largest of the rhinestones on the treetop, and then I used another large one right here underneath the joy, and then I used a small one over here just along the side just to add a little bit more sparkle. And there we go. That is my project for the day. And thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube channel today. I do so appreciate it. And if you don't already have a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, well, I'd love to be your demonstrator. Or you could join my team. There's a great offer going right now with a planner. So you get $125 worth of product for $99, and that's puts you, I think, at a 20% discount, which is wonderful. And then that's what you also start with when you join, is a 20% discount. Then you get this planner. It's I think it's 8.5 by 9, 8 by 9.5, something like that. It's a pretty good sized one, and it has all of the pages. I think it goes for 18 months, and then it's got dividers, and it's got stickers and all kinds of things that you can use with a planner. So that is part of the join offer through the end of August. So there are my cards. You'll have to let me know. I do think I like this one a little better. It's not quite so busy with all of this extra stuff on there. I think in this case less is more. I think I like it a lot better with just using the material that's already on that piece of designer series paper. And I do like the embossed word joy here rather than just the ink stamped one. So those are the changes that I made. And so there is my, or are my cards for this one. I have a $60 shopping spree on me as a monthly prize, and I'm going to start posting the winners on my blog. Usually I just email the person and that kind of thing, but why not? I'll put it on the blog, and that way everybody knows who won. And you put yourself in the drawing by putting an order of any size on my store, lbedinger.stampinup.net, and you can get to it through my blog, www.inkandingenuity.com. I think that's it for now. I've got my retired stuff up on the blog for sale. I think I'm just about 2.5 weeks away from the kit. Again, thanks for stopping by, and I will be back soon with more cards, more projects, and more tips. Bye!